introduction, founder of the Resilience Project, co-host of the Imperfects Podcast, and 400-meter running enthusiast and masters athlete.
That's the, I mean, I'm excited because whenever I'm doing a podcast, it's to talk about the first two you mentioned, which I'm happy to talk about. But the one I really want to talk about is the third one, just there, the Masters athlete, 400-meter runner. That's the thing that I spend most of my day thinking about. And so finally, I've been asked to talk about it on a
Well,
podcast.
that creeps up on your podcast quite a bit, and it sort of strays into training, specifically your training. And you can see you're basically feverish to talk about it. And usually your co-hosts and your guests are often not at that same level of enthusiasm. And we here at the Mostly Training Podcast uh, tend to talk mostly about training. But I would say that your work and your family, for you and me, for everyone else, that always impacts training, and the training always impacts everything else. So although you do tend to be talking about these things that are your professional roles, they have an impact on what you do in training, and your training certainly has an impact on how you show up to those things.
So yeah, I would say it's a great place to start, by the way. So I would say that family and work negatively impacts training, but training positively impacts my family and work. Uh,
Yes.
it's the when I can I like so when we do our podcast, for example, we've actually changed the whole podcast team. Whilst they don't want to talk about my 400-meter running on the podcast, and I try and, as you mentioned, I try and squeeze it in all the time, like constantly try and squeeze it into conversation. And sometimes they'll let me go, but then it gets edited. I'll listen to the final episode and it's just been edited out. I don't talk about it at all. Um, but what I would say is that our podcast team understand how important it is for me, my training. So we now don't start our podcast day till 11 o'clock. So I train every morning before we do the podcast. And I mean, we can get into this later on, but I've recently diagnosed ADHD, and it's so important for me for that reason.
Yeah.
For the very simple reason that I am so much better at my job when I've trained in the morning. I am so much better. I mean, to really boil it down, I have much better verbal fluency. I have much better access to words, to thoughts, to feelings when I've trained in the morning. It's as simple as that. I have noticed there is a point to which you can go too hard at
Mm.
training and you don't have, you're good for about half an hour for the podcast. And we'll do an episode. So the episode we'll start recording at 11 in the morning. I'll train from 9 till sort of 10:15, 10:30, then get in, quick shower, do the episode. If I've gone too hard at training, I'm no good after about probably two. I'll drop off a cliff pretty quickly. But if I
Yeah.
can training, that is perfect for me for let's say I'm doing podcast stuff from 11 till 5. So to come back to your question, they all have a huge impact on each other, and I'm only really playing with that now for the first time this year. As in, last year was just go hard at training, hard as you can, and I'm exhausted by the end of the day, but that's fine. But now I'm trying to sort of manage that. In fact, to make the answer even longer, and I think a lot of people will be interested in this, but I did a lot of work with the Queensland State of Origin team, and I remember Billy Slater in one of his talks to the players. In fact, it was day one of camp, the 2023 series. He just said to them, guys, it's a 10-day camp, and we finished the 10-day camp with game one of State of Origin. And I need to remind you that you only have one energy, like you have one energy, and we need to go for that for training. You need to go for that for family. You need to go for that for social media. Can I just ask you to really manage to protect your energy? And so I reckon we can get rid of social media because that takes energy you don't need. Let's just make sure we are. And I was sitting there thinking, God, that's so true because for much of my life, I will completely empty the tank at training, and then I'll get to work and I'll be exhausted. And then when I get home at the end of the night, I've got absolutely nothing. So something goes wrong at home and my tolerance is, I've got no space for it. And I thought, yeah, it's so true. I've got one energy. And so take a bit for training, take a bit for work, take a bit for family. But for me, that order is really important.
But
It
the
needs to
appropriate dosage of training seems to add energy to those other two things.
Totally. The appropriate amount. Yeah, I'm still playing with that. I haven't got that 100% right.
With the work part, because you, I think, broadly work towards helping people be better, and sometimes that's a professional athlete, and you've done a lot of that. And then there's whoever's listening to your podcast, there's the kids that benefit from the Resilience Project. How long has it taken you to learn that this is something that, when dosed appropriately, can help you be better versus something that could really mess up your ability to do the other things that you do?
Yeah, I would say I got away with it took me a long time. It took me a long time to learn that. And when I say learn that, I know it now and I understand it. I still wouldn't say I've got the right measure of yeah, it's so hard. I sometimes think how much I would love to go back in time and just the years that I wasted not really applying myself at uni and I had a part-time job. I'd love to go back in time and train as a professional athlete for a couple of years just to experience that. I was never good enough um, to warrant doing that, but I just would have loved to experience being able to train as a elite athlete without trying to manage all the other stuff because it's so hard. And for the vast majority of the audience will people who are non-elite athletes who will know exactly what that balance is. I mean, I'm only learning now with my ADHD that exercising at night is not a good idea for me because so often I would go, the only chance I've got is to do some gym or some kind of training in the garage at 9 o'clock at night. And I'd do that. And then I'd be awake till 2 in the morning because I've just, for the first time of the day, I'm getting proper supply of dopamine. I'm so wired, I can't sleep. So this is all stuff that I'm exploring and tinkering with now. This is right now is the best version I've had of it. But there was, I look back to there was a year where my job was to go to every state of origin club and basically spend 2 weeks at the club working with all the groups from the A graders to the under 20s, under 18s, under 16s, the partners, the head office staff, sponsors. It was everything. And I would travel, do this work. I only had one child at that time. And I just wouldn't train. I'd go, well, I don't have time for training and I need to, and I just didn't train at all. And I look back on it and it was the most tired I've ever felt. I'm the most exhausted, the most run down, and probably the flattest. Like I was quite miserable because I was in and out of hotels. All I had to do, if I go back into, all I had to do was just do 30 minutes of movement in the morning when I first woke up. Just go to the hotel gym, do 30 minutes of movement. It would have changed everything. Like it would have changed everything. But I just didn't. I was like, no, no, this time of my life, it's all about I have to work. I've got a very busy job. That's all I've got time for. But I'm learning now that's just rubbish. Like I'm busier now work-wise and I'm fitting in so much exercise. So
You've got more scope to delegate now, which helps because you did put in that hard yakka. But I think a lot of people, they hope they get to a point in their career or in their lives where things are established and then they could carve out this space, but they tend not to do that. If you just look at the majority of people that are getting around, their work just occupies more and more space and their well-being occupies less, and the family sort of stays where it makes sense for them, given those other two. But often that training and let alone nervous system regulation, that just dissipates to zero. And then it might just become a how can I exhaust myself and burn as many calories as possible in the 30 minutes I have available, either before or after work, which just floods the body with stress hormones, which isn't going to help over the long run. With you, because you're specific, like training is this thing that serves multiple benefits. But what I found interesting, and you and I have talked about this before, is your goal is this high wire act where you have to do the training that's very fast, which increases the risk. And that's the only way that you can pursue your performance goals in your chosen sport, which is running a lap of 400 meters as fast as possible, sometimes with other people in the
yeah.
form of a relay. But that, just by definition of the goal, regardless of you and what else you're doing, more increased likelihood of injury, which can create an additional stress and even at worst take away from the thing that you are kind of basing your entire, not entire, but a big part of your mental health is the pillar is movement, and that can kind of be taken away pretty quickly because you have this other pursuit.
Yeah. It's a high wire act is absolutely it's the best way to describe it. There are so many elements that are at like there's so many risky elements that happen when you are trying to. So basically, I mean, the end goal for me is to try and run the 400 meters in 51.5 seconds. Because if I can do that, and three other guys can do that, we break the national record for the Masters 4x4, which we're hell bent on. The two Olympians in that, who you obviously know, Brendan Cole and Steve Hooker, as part of that, another guy called Simon Glendenning, who currently holds the Masters 801K record. And so for me, I'm always trying to run that fast. But to do that, as you said, at training, I have to do some really, really intense sessions, which I just know are going to completely fry my nervous system. Well, not my nervous system. I don't know what it is. It would be neurologically, I'm just absolutely
Mhm.
like that. And that's probably 2 sessions a week. I will go that hard. And I know that, yeah, my work may not be as good. I don't tell work or I don't tell the podcast when I turn up, I'm not going to be as good today because I've just run two 300s at absolute maximum effort. But yeah, it's ironic because I actually today, as of Saturday, I have my first injury in. I've got a grade one. I think it's a grade one hamstring tear, and it's the first injury I've had in 2 years. And so I feel like with the help of my coach Brendan Cole, who I mentioned just before, I say with his help, he is very much responsible for the fact I'm not injured, but I do everything he asked me to do. So it's so interesting what a sprinter does for training. I think it would surprise a lot of people because I think,
Absolutely.
and the amount of people who say to me, "Oh, you love running, we should go for a run together." I'm like, no, no,
Not that sort of run.
no.
Yeah.
First of all, I find that kind of boring. That the way I'm wired, I don't enjoy that. My knees can't handle it, and it won't do anything for my 400-meter running. In fact, it would be detrimental for me to go for a longer run. So, what we do for training is such a strange, I shouldn't say strange, just it surprises people what it involves. But you're right, it's a high wire act because so often to do, I mean, like the session I just said before, two 300-meter efforts, that's it. So people will go, well, it's 600 meters total, and plus the
Yeah.
warm up. The warm up takes about 45 minutes, but I'm just jogging a slow lap at the start, then doing basically yoga, and then some drills to warm up. But that's my Garmin will say I've done all up the whole session about 2Ks total, which for people going, well, how's that good for you? I cannot believe how good it is. I can't believe how good it is for you. Like it really just, I
Mm.
always feel stronger the next day. Whereas I don't know if you get that with your training, but it's really hard. The next day you feel stronger because of it. I never get that with long distance running. I always feel sore and
I
tired.
think that's rare, although that's something that's worth aiming for, a training that makes you feel good. Sometimes the work that's needed to get there is going to require this breakdown because it's a lot of hard work. But then if it's balanced out with sessions in between that are more moderate, the active recovery, and those do leave you feeling good the next day, and the next day happens to be when you need to go hard, then
Yeah.
that's great. But if those go hard days you feel good
Yeah.
as well, then that's perfect. You know, like that if you can get there. But that is going to depend on the person and what they've got going on in life and the goal. And
Yeah.
that's why I think most people, you're absolutely right. Most people would think 2 by 300 meters is nothing, but by lowering the volume, you just increase the intensity, and over time, you increase your capacity to be able to produce intensity, so operate more of your nervous system to be able to turn it on.
Yeah.
So you versus someone else versus an Olympic 400-meter runner, each of you is accessing more because you've had more practice to it and you've got more skill at it. And that means that someone else's 300 meters is not the same as yours. When I was
Yeah.
doing 500 meters on the row machine, a good effort on that would 4 days later, I was still, and it was just a bit over a minute of work.
I should clarify that. The last time I did that 300 meters, I just I felt unwell for a long time. Like I just felt, I don't know. It was like everything was not operating properly, like including my brain. And my heart rate took a long time to get back down to normal resting heart rate. It was kind of everything was in shock for about 4 days. I think it's like there are certain sessions I do that I just know, like the fascia stuff in the gym. I always feel so much better the next day.
Mm.
And but yeah, those really massive efforts when I do them properly, when I really nail them. I did one. It was like a tapering week, and Brendan said to me, "Just do 200s for me."
Mm.
I got carried away because I just felt great.
Not the first time I've heard you say that.
Yeah,
I got carried away.
and springy and just quick.
Yeah.
I tried to do the first one as sort of like a tempo, but I went very close to a PB and went, "Oh, well, this is fun. Like this is why I do it. Like for me, I'm not an Olympic athlete. It's the joy of running fast. Probably won't be Brendan's favorite thing to hear, but I think
Mm.
I'm gonna have a proper rest and have another crack at see if I can do a PB at training, just like literally tapping my Garmin on my wrist.
From
And
the standing start.
yeah, from a standing start, I
Great.
just felt good. I didn't quite get the PB, but I was very close, and it just felt. It's a Thursday morning. It was just a beautiful morning in Melbourne. It's 26 degrees. One of the last warm days we're going to have. And I had the truck to myself. No one else had turned up, and it just felt so great. And I did it and thought, wow, that was amazing. But then I paid the next 4 or 5 days. I was in all.
Mm.
I was just so crook, even though I felt good at the time. So, but then I was like, how great! I'm 44 years old, and I'm running. As a 44-year-old, I'm running as pretty much as fast as I was an 18-year-old. And that just makes me feel so great. Like, regardless of breaking records, regardless of how I go in the race over the weekend, I was on such a high from it, such a big high.
Did sport serve the same purpose for you when you were at school as it does now, or were you aware of any of that happening in the background?
That's a great question. So, sport was absolutely my identity. It's what gave me confidence. When I realized I was good at sport, that's what gave me confidence at school. That was my currency at school, was being good at sport. It was really interesting actually because cricket was my main sport. But whenever athletics season came around, I'd do athletics for the school and loved it. But I was always a cricketer, so I just never really thought I'd do it properly. And then when I was in year 12, I got a scholarship to the Victorian Institute of Sport for cricket. And that was when I was 17 years old. And for 6 months, we had a guy, the strength and conditioning guy was a guy called Brett Snelson, who I don't think does strength and conditioning anymore. I believe he imports next. I think I can't remember, but anyway, he came up with this thing, which his own training for cricket, his own fitness training, which was we do this running session twice a week, which was he called it unit running, where you would jog very low intensity zone two for 10 minutes, then you would stop and do six 60-meter sprints at close to 100%, and then you would jog and that'd be 1 unit. And we'd start, week one was 1 unit, that was it. Week two was 2 units, you'd jog for 10 minutes, then you'd do six 40-meter sprints up a hill, then jog for 10 minutes, then you do eight 40-meter sprints or something. And you'd work up to eight units. So after week eight, you were doing 8 units and it was a big effort. And I just did that because I thought it was good for cricket. When I was doing athletics at the time, I wasn't as elite as I was at cricket. And I would come, I don't know, I was okay, I was fine at it. And my school didn't prioritize athletics, and other schools did. There was always scholarship boys from other schools, and they were all Victorian sprinters, some of them national sprinters. And we would literally do paper, scissors, rock with my mates from school to see who had to go in heat one, because no one wanted to go in heat one because you got absolutely destroyed by these scholarship boys. And after 6 months of doing this unit running, it was the first meet of the season. We'd done no training, and I was going, "Oh God, don't put me in heat one. These guys are all national runners." Did paper, scissors, rock, and I lost, and I went in heat one. And the last time I'd run 100, about 10 months before that, I ran a 12.2 or 11.9. And after 6 months of doing this unit running, which is not the best sprint training there is, but I did that and I ran a 10.78 and I
Mm.
beat those scholarship kids. And I remember going, whoa, I mean, that was awesome. I loved that.
Yeah.
Really strange because I'd never run that quick before, and then had a scholarship offer for the Victorian Institute of Sport for sprinting and had to choose between cricket and sprinting. And I chose cricket because I was always the cricket guy. And by the age of 20, it was pretty obvious I wasn't going to play for Australia, but I just didn't give up on that dream and I kept playing till I was 35. It became something very different. It was more, um, it was just my life really playing cricket. I didn't really know much else, but I look back and I just wish so much I had maybe at the age 24, 25 gone, okay, I think cricket's not going to work. Let's try sprinting because um, I would have, yeah, I just would have loved to have seen what I could have done.
When
But
did it come back around?
well, it's so funny. This is such a strange thing. I retired from cricket age 35, 36, and I had no, I would do 5K runs for cricket and 2K runs, not very specific to cricket, but that's all I really knew to do. And I'd train for cricket and it gave me great structure and I liked training for an event. And then I went a year with nothing. I didn't really train. We just had we had our first child and I felt very lost and very flat without training. And I drove past an ath track with Penny, my wife, was in the car, and I said, can you, I'm going to run a lap, I'm going to run a 400. Could you time me and see how fast I am? Just interested. So I did a warm up and I did a 400.
This is odd behavior just out of the gate like this. Okay, good. I'm totally on board. Like I'm on board with this, but this is this is odd behavior.
It's so odd because when I saw the ath track, I went, that's it. That's the thing I want to do. I want to do athletics. I want to do sprinting because I've been trying to do longer runs, but I've just been finding them so boring and I'd get no reward from it. I didn't feel happy from it. I just
Yeah.
felt a bit, I wasn't that good at it. I thought, oh, that's what I used to do, sprinting. I can't do ones and twos, my hamstrings will snap, but I'm going to run a 400. Penny, you time me. And she timed me and she said, what do you reckon you got? And I said, oh, when I was at school, I used to run 53, so I haven't done it in a while. So I don't know, maybe a 55, 56. And she went, okay. That was a minute and 9 seconds. And I went, oh, God, I'm never doing that again. And then I couldn't sleep that night because I was lying there thinking, no, I think that's the reason I do need to do this. Like that feels a bit depressing. But I want to do this. I'm going to do this. And so I spent the next I looked up how do I compete? Is there a masters event? Is there, and obviously was, and joined a club and I trained, coached myself. So I looked back and realized I was coaching myself to run 1500s because I was doing shocking, not specific at all. But what it did do was I went from 85 kilos down to 75 kilograms, which is a much better weight for a 400-meter runner, someone of my height. Lost the weight that I was carrying, and then I just got into a good aerobic base basically. And then my first race of the season, I ran a minute and 1 second after about 6 months of training, so shaved a good 8 seconds off. And then by chance, Kathy Freeman's coach, Peter Fortune, I met him and he said, I'll train you. And he got my time down to 53.5 seconds that season. And it was just in a year to drop that amount of time off just felt, I don't know how I've functioned in my life without sprint training. I really don't. It's just the greatest joy. And anyone listening to this will know the feeling of when you have given everything. We had a race a couple of weeks ago, ran a 400, the fastest I possibly could. And I was just sitting on the bench afterwards, still had my spikes on, and I was just sitting there going, this has to be the best feeling in the world. Like there is nothing high. Once I got over the sickness of about 15 minutes, the high I have right now is just unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it seems as though the opportunity to get better, making progress in that year where you could was just you're basically on the hook, but you like the thing itself. A lot of people they like the preparation and the grind, and then by the time they get to the start line, they're almost obligated to do it because it justifies all
Yeah.
of what's gone into it and any sacrifice they've made with family or work that is all because of this thing, but they're not really that interested in doing the thing itself. You seem to like both.
Yeah, it makes me so nervous racing. I get so nervous before it, and I feel like that's a good thing. I think as a 44-year-old, it's a good, I mean, any age, but it's I wake up on Saturday mornings excited, so excited it's race day. But then when it gets closer to the race, I'm going, why am I doing this? I don't have to do this. Why am I, there's no one's making me do this. Why the fuck am I doing this? Because I start to feel a bit sick and a bit like I want to get out of it. I'm like, I don't want to do this. This is going to be awful. And then the warm up starts and I get so nervous every single time. And that I just feel like that's good. Like I feel like it's so good to get really nervous about something. Like when I was a kid, it feels the same. And you get seeded in Victorian athletics or any athletics around Australia. You enter your time, and you don't run against people your age. You run against people who run a similar time. And for me, that's typically a group of athletes who are on the way up. So they're usually the kids I run against are usually 16 to 18 years old. In fact, I had a race the other day where a guy I always forget that I'm much older, but this kid said to his mate, oh, we got the old guy in our race. And I the old man in our race. And I looked around going, oh, please be an old man here. And I turned around at me.
That is
Uh,
you.
and so, but it makes me feel a little bit self-conscious in a way, but then also just like it scares me. 400 scares me because you feel so sick at the end. You would know, but anyone the feeling of I haven't even experienced a tenth of what you feel like how much you put in. But that feeling of being scared of what it's going to do to you, but then just doing it and then experience it. And then I just think it's the more people who did this kind of thing, the better the world would be to experience that, like the humbling feeling of giving everything that you physically have. And emotionally, you're taking a big risk as well because it's
Mm.
like you risk failure, you risk embarrassment, you risk all this stuff, but you do it anyway. I just think the more people experience that, the better the world would be.
All these things I would completely agree with. And like, these are the positives and the reason to put your balls on the line.
Yeah.
But the curiosity I have with you in and with people in general and performance goals, especially with when people they're at a vintage or at a capacity or for whatever reason they're non-professionals, which is the vast majority of people. And I went through this phase. Well, the prior phase was everything was about performance and health was only as necessary.
Yeah.
And then and when my wife got pregnant, and that shifted pretty massively for the first time. I never really thought about lifespan. I was like, that is not my area of concern. And then quite quickly, I'm like, I wouldn't mind hanging around a little longer because I want to get to know this little bloke as much as possible. And your incentives change. And then I went through a period of time where because I neglected health and even feeling good, that wasn't I never even really paid attention to how I felt because most of the time the answer was not great. It'd feel like tired and sore. So checking in with that when it didn't really change what you needed to do on a day-to-day basis just wasn't particularly useful. And over time, it seemed to think, well, probably not that healthy either. So then I
Yeah.
went through a phase of thinking, okay, what does it look like if health and feeling good are the goal? And that will still require hard work. And to most people, it present as pretty similar because it's still going to involve hard training. But the goal isn't eking out milliseconds or kilograms. It's feeling good and lifespan. And then I became detached from having a performance goal for a period of time and
Yeah.
became aware of the risks of having that goal because it has the scope to take away the other function that training is serving and what it probably should look like for most people most of the time. Feeling good, taking care of yourself, being in good working order for longer. And then you can have goals, whether it's running fast or lifting heavy, where there's more risk than is necessary to achieve those other goals.
Mm.
And so I started thinking, well, what does it look like to both, is there scope to do that healthily where you don't take this risk with you? And are performance goals required when you could just train, you could still run fast, you could do yoga, you could do some cardio, and you're not going to show up to work like completely devastated by training. But then the other side of it is you don't get any of the things that you just talked about, which is the other side of it, and then perhaps justifies the risk.
Yeah. I feel like for so many people, it's like it's just different for everyone. Like what, and I don't know, a psychologist will probably know more about this than me, but I feel like a lot of it is to do with your relationship with maybe exercise and training and sport as a kid. I don't know, like one of my best mates, he runs 8Ks once a week. He swims 1,500 meters once a week, and he does light weights sort of once a week. And that's it's all he's done for the last 10 years. He doesn't increase it, he doesn't decrease it. And he loves it. Like he loves doing that, but he doesn't compete in anything. There's no, he just says, I just like staying fit. And that's how he does
Right,
it.
but is he into it? Is he like looking at YouTube videos of something of how to get better, or is sort of content with this is
He's
the yeah,
just very content with
yeah.
that. There's no, I don't think he even measures, which to me feels crazy, but he's never measuring how he just knows what he'll run
Yeah.
that distance. He won't look at any metrics around it.
Just
He's
knows it's 8K and then just runs it and gets home when he gets home. And
I don't care if I'm slower today or quicker, or I don't think
yeah,
he wouldn't even know if he's quicker or slower on any particular day. He just does that because it's good for you to be fit, and that's for him. That's like a level of fitness that is. Well, I just want to know everything. Like I want to
yeah.
know, and I think that's because why is that? I don't. I This is a question for my psychologist but I need to know that I'm doing everything that I can to within the, I still need, my priority is always to be a very present and loving dad. And I have responsibility to a couple of businesses, so I can't drop the ball there. But something about the obsession to me with the metrics and everything involved is ticking off the much bigger goal of like, I will be a much better dad and I'll be around for much longer because I'm now for the first time, I'm eating really well and I didn't for a long time. I remember when I was 30, when I started taking the running properly, I thought I should speak to a dietitian about my food. And they said, give your diet a mark out of 10. And I said, oh, it's probably an 8, I reckon. And I said, what are you having? Tell me. And I said, oh, so in the morning I'll have, yeah, I'll just have like a toasted ham and cheese sandwich for breakfast because that's like, that's like a good start to the day. I'm not hungry after that. And then I might have, I'll have orange juice for that. And then at morning I'll have a croissant just because, it's good, just so I don't feel hungry. And then lunch I'll probably have like probably another toasted jam sandwich and then I'll have whatever for dinner, and I thought that was good, but to run faster you got to eat better and you've got to sleep better, and so I will go to bed earlier now because I want to run faster. But all that stuff makes me a much better dad as well. When the kids wake up at 5 in the morning and they're upset about something, I've gone to bed earlier because I want to run faster. I'm also going to be a much better dad. I can cope much better in that moment. So um, yeah, I mean, I'm probably making excuses for my obsession with
No,
sprinting.
I just think it's good to talk about because a lot of the people I work with and the people that I tend to connect with in the real world, there's almost this whenever their brain's not thinking about something else, it sort of drifts back to the things that are innately important to them. And it's often training for a certain collective of people. And the thing I found not found like curious with you was that you have these considerable responsibilities. And but when I talk to you about training, it's not, and then one of my other priorities is training. You're pretty honest about, I think about this thing a lot, and you don't really apologize for it as and or sort of try and placate the person you're talking to by saying, and I know it's not that important because it's just running around a track. Like you own it and you almost minimize, yeah, I've got a couple of businesses, but those businesses do more to help people than you running fast
Yeah,
around a track is.
totally, totally.
But
Yeah,
you don't apologize for that, which I think is all like it's just what it is.
yeah. Yeah. I think the justification, not even justification for me. I know that I'm so much better at those things when I feel happy. When I feel happy, I'm much better at doing my job, and running fast is what makes me feel happy. And I know when I run fast, or I'm training towards running fast, when I go home at the end of the day or I'm with the kids, I'm just I feel like I'm the best version of myself, and that to me, that's a very loving and very patient. I know when I feel good, I'm loving and I'm patient, and I'm fun. And for me, just the way I'm wired, the quicker I'm running, the better I'm at accessing those things.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and I mean, my wife is just incredible as far as the amount she puts up with me talking about my training and my racing. And she's like hoping to run her first marathon this year.
Mm.
And so she is into it, but not to the obsession level that I am. But she is happy to chat to me about it, and she's happy to say, yep, you've got training, go and do your training. I know you need to train. And I think because she just understands intrinsically that like I have no doubt I'm a much better partner as well when I've done all that training. And I am lucky that I've done a lot of hard work over 15 years to be able to train at 9 till 10:30 in the morning. I'm so lucky well, no, lucky is the word. I've worked incredibly hard for a long time. And because of that, I can train during work hours and still get the work in I need to do professionally. So I'll say that again. I can train from 9 till 10:30, and then I can get to work and I can do the work I have to do at work in within work hours. So so my training will rarely impede on family time.
Yeah.
It's on work time. But I've learned the way my brain works now that I can't work from 9 to 5. I just don't. My output's shocking by the end of the day. That I'm very good in bursts. When I'm doing something that really interests me, I'm very good in our sort of hour and a half bursts. I'm really good. But apart from that, I'm exhausted. So it's like sprinting.
Mm.
I cannot believe how much of I'm learning my life and my brain is like sprinting. Like it's look after it the best you can, prepare it, and then go as hard as you can with something you're passionate about, and then recover the best that you possibly can. I feel like the 400 meters, and I've discussed this with 400-meter runners who don't agree with me, but yeah, I think it's so analogous to life, the 400.
Mm.
You stay in your lane, you put your head down at the start, you work so hard at the start to set yourself up, you stay in your lane, you don't get distracted by what everyone else is doing. And then it's this thing of like when you're under pressure, stay relaxed, stay as relaxed as possible. The more under pressure you feel, the more
Mm.
you need to relax and lean into that and just keep looking forward. Um, and yeah, and when you do it really well, it feels effortless, which is rare, but you get to the end, you're like, I should be in a world of pain right now. I've just run the fastest run, but I just feel really good. Anyway,
Yeah.
apologies to,
I
I've
think
sort
it's
of,
there. I also think it maybe indicates the extent to which you think about this more than even other 400-meter runners.
potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
And being a bit older as well, like I'm talking the 400 meters I talk to, they're in their early to mid 20s, so they probably haven't experienced life the way I have, and that I know that sometimes you can do all the right things, and for whatever reason, you get beaten down or by whatever, something idiotic. You just don't, it's just not your day. And that happens in life, but it also happens to 400 sometimes. You just, for whatever reason, it doesn't happen for you on any given day. But you can control being relaxed under pressure. You control not worrying about what other people are doing. Um, there's a wonderful video on YouTube, which I won't give a link to, but when I started my 400-meter running, there was I was just entering every event I could, and I saw the Victorian State Championships. I was eligible to enter. I thought, oh, I'll just go and run a heat. That's fine. And I thought that'd be seated, but it was just random. It was to find out the quickest sprinter in Victoria, the 400 meters. I was running next to a guy called Cam Searle, who ended up winning the state championships. He was in my heat, and he happens to be a fan of the podcast. And he goes, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And I looked, yeah, I feel like I probably shouldn't be here. He passed me within 5 meters. He was inside me on the stage. He took me within 5 meters, and it was the most humbling feeling. But it was so exciting. I was like, "Well, this is the fastest guy in Victoria. Stay in your lane and don't and just relax.
Yeah.
Just relax under pressure." And I did that. The YouTube video, he finishes. I still had 80 meters to go, and they stopped the YouTube video before I finished. They didn't wait for me to finish.
Well, I'll have to find out and probably put it in the show notes. It's just for all those that are curious.
I know.
So because of the timing of this, you had already sort of establishing a public profile and you weren't all bothered to go out and look relatively slow, at least compared to some of the people you're racing.
Yeah. I, to be really honest, I work and the podcast has given me a level of confidence that like I don't mind if I look really slow. But it's not. It's funny. It's a contradiction. It's not my main thing.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it's like no one's going to go, God, that guy's just so slow. They'll probably go, oh, that's that Resilience Project or podcast guy who, wow, he's doing athletics. He's not very quick compared to the quickest man in Victoria. It's given me a great confidence to just go out there and have a massive crack at it and know that if I fail, which I don't think there is any version of failing. If you're a 44-year-old and you are passionate about 400-meter running or any physical pursuit, I don't think there's any way you can really fail. I don't. I think, you know,
I could say one way you could fail potentially is to have the goal to say you have the goal to obligate the people around you to support it because you said it's important to you, and
yes,
then to not honor the goal by doing the right things in terms of being well and getting to sleep on time because any potential you hope to have, which revealing it, no matter what the numbers are, to say this is as good as I can be for this thing. That
yeah.
that has to be the goal. And the only way you can do that is to do the stuff, not just train, but to do the stuff outside of training. You need to make smart decisions on average. And if you aren't, to be half invested, I think is the only way to do it wrong.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's such a good point. It's you just won't get you're letting the people down around you who are making sacrifices for you, and if you're not doing it properly, then yeah, I would 100% agree with that. I mean, the other thing I haven't said, which I probably should mention, is that earlier in the year, I read out a letter that I'd written to parents of neurodivergent kids. In fact, Sam, you were there when I first had the idea to maybe do something. You and Hamish and myself were at my place, and we'd done like a couple of day training camp where we just trained in a
Yeah.
log.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, 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 exactly. What else to do?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I loved it. And then at the end, we had that like post exercise high of just we were just chatting. And it was the first time you and I ever chatted properly. And you were asking about my parenting, my life. And I was telling you about how one of our kids had been diagnosed autistic and how it was by far the hardest thing I've ever had to do, by far. And it wasn't a public thing at that time. So no one knew that I was turning up to the podcast, trying to do these interviews. And so often we would have to stop the podcast interview because I start crying because we touched on something that was so raw in my life at that time. But it wasn't public. And you had listened to everything I'd said. And then Hamish said, I think if you want this could be your most important work. I think if you want to talk about this as a parent, and that was the first time that conversation the three of us had where I thought, yeah, maybe I could talk about this publicly. The last, when it's been, the last 4 years, let's say, when the diagnosis has meant what my child is going through is something that I never thought kids could go through. Like I
Mm.
never thought the world could be that hard for a 4 or 5-year-old kid. The pain they've been through has, you feel everything your kids feel. Training, I don't know how I would have got through the last 4 years of my life without training. I don't understand. I just don't know. Like I would still be here. I would still be breathing, but I would be a shadow of my former self. I'd be a shell.
Yeah.
Training has been the most important thing in coping with the most challenging thing I've ever been through in my entire life. I think about it all the time. I do a lot of breath work, gratitude breath work. And when you're asked to think about what you're grateful for, I just think the role that training has played getting me through the toughest time of my life has just been immense.
Yeah.
And by the way, I've never run 51.5 seconds. I've never actually got there. I've got close a couple of times and it'll be great when I do it, but it doesn't really matter to me. I'm not an Olympian. That's not my purpose in life to run 51.5, but at the end of the day, it has got me through the hardest thing in my life. And I will forever be grateful to this thing that I do.
It seems like it serves so many purposes. At times, it might just be a useful distraction, and you've got like you could meditate for 20 minutes, but when you're on the track, it's doing the same thing. Plus, you get all this other stuff that's fun.
Totally, totally. I probably, if I was meditating to get through it, absolutely would help. I probably wouldn't be overly vigilant with my diet. I wouldn't be overly vigilant with my
Mm.
sleep. Um, I probably wouldn't be as obsessive about it. I mean, I actually have a memory of a really awful night we had with our child. It was one of the most, I mean, it was just very painful for everyone involved. And um, the next day I had scheduled to do a training session and I got there and went, I was just very teary and I turned off the track. I just felt so teary. And there was a group of sprinters there who I know, and they said, "Do you want to jump in and do a session with us?" And I didn't feel like it. I didn't feel like talking to them. I just wanted to be by myself. And I just jogged 2 laps very slowly, started to do the warm up, started the like yoga type stuff you do, the mobility stuff. And just that movement made me feel like, no, I do feel like talking to them. I'll talk to them. And we started chatting as they did that. We warmed up together. I went, oh, no, okay, I will jump in with you. And I'm sure it's the same with rowing, but when you are with training with another group, you find another level. Well, at least that's what happens with me.
Some
And
people more than others, but
yeah,
on average, yeah, that's the benefit of it.
so it was a session with 6 150s off 4 minutes. And I usually do those in about, back then I was doing them about 20 seconds each. And the first one we took off, and I took off with this group of people, and we went around at 18.4, and I couldn't believe it. And then we did we did all five of them under 19 seconds, which I'd never done before. And I just felt incredible after that. And I went home just so engaged in, well, I didn't bury my head in the sand and go, I feel great. I've just run fast. I just went, I've done that. I feel amazing. I've got so much, I don't know, self-esteem from that or so much joy from that. Let's go home and let's try and pick up the pieces to what happened last night. And I went back there with it's just like, I was just on cloud nine, and I walked into the house a completely different person.
Mm.
Uh,
Okay.
and so on that particular occasion, it just felt life-changing because it helped me to help my child.
This is the other side of the conversation. I remember that as well, the chat we had at your place, and I didn't know that you hadn't or weren't yet ready to talk about it publicly. To me, we were just having a chat about your family. And so it was a bit of a revelation to me that like, even as you were reading the letter on your podcast, I was like, this feels heavy. And then it occurred to me like, oh, you hadn't really talked about this at all to any extent publicly. And and then it just left me more curious about how training works for you because now I'm a person that has performance goals and family and work responsibilities and trying to make it all work. And I know that my how I got to here is just all versions of not normal in that I've basically got a 25-year uninterrupted run. Well, interruptions, but mostly uninterrupted consistent training where it's always been a feature and then easy to almost not question what's it all about, what purpose is this serving? And when I had kids, all of a sudden the priorities they didn't exactly shift, but they took on there was a reason to for some inquiry into does this still make sense? Is this a useful way to spend my time and energy? And when I was listening to you, that you'd both everything we've talked about, one thing is palpable is that you really care about training. Like I have no doubt it's important to you listening to you on your podcast, and it almost feels like like a raised finger and be like, can I just talk about training in the 400 for a moment? I'm like, I get that. That's how my brain feels a lot of the time. But I still feel in moments now as a dad that because I train at home for the most part, or I'm going to go somewhere else, it requires this departure. And in that moment, it might be that my wife is dealing with two young kids. They're both making noise. There's things for her to do. And if I were going to go train now, I could just pitch in and contribute to all of this. And you know cognitively, well, no, I have to, this is a priority for me as well. And I need to fill up my cup, and it serves these other benefits, a lot of which you've talked about. And I know that she's cool with it, and we've talked about it. And I reaffirm these are my goals. This is why I'm going to pursue them. This is the timeline. This is how I'm going to go about it. These are some of the compromises that we might need to make. And yet I still feel these moments where I'm like, oh, like it's a kind of a selfish thing. And
Yeah.
so to connect with you on uh it might feel like that, but I have to believe that it serves these benefits even for the people and the things that are important to me, but that might require that I need to step out at times. But in getting to know you, to you to be like, I've got this thing that's really important, but also your family life at times can be difficult to manage and lots of moving parts, then me trying to understand how you cope with those moments where you have to make the right decision. And at that point in time, that might be to go for a run or to go train or to go whatever it is for you or for me or whatever else someone might have planned on those days.
Yeah, that is something. I mean, I just think about the amount of times where it's just I haven't like I'd planned, I have my sessions planned, I know I've got this time, and something happens with the kids. One of them gets sick, or one of them comes home from school, or one of them, I mean, that happens a lot with one of our kids who will need to come home early from school for the reasons with ASD. I'm still learning to, I'm not good at um, hiding my disappointment. And
Mm.
I'm still, even though like family is clearly the number one priority, so I should be better at going, oh, I had plans for this session today. It's not going to happen because someone in the family needs me,
Yeah.
or Penny's working, so I need to step up here. It means I don't get to train, but that's okay. I trained yesterday. I'll train tomorrow. I'm still not good at that. I still sulk way too much.
Yeah. Internally, or you sort of letting everyone know
I
I'm a
think
bit sad about this.
everyone knows. I know. I know everyone knows,
Yeah.
and I feel a bit ashamed about that with Penny because she's so understanding, and it's like, yeah, it just happens a lot that
Do you do that in the moment because you know it's not going to change? Like you know it's like kind of petty and it's
yes,
not going to change the reality. And
yeah,
other people need something from you at the moment. Like it's needs based.
yeah,
Otherwise, we're all like respect your training, but
yeah.
right now we need you to be here. Are you in that moment? Do you think there's part of you that's going, but I'll let them know that I have mixed feelings about this, which reaffirms to everyone around me that training is really important because I don't want them to forget.
I think it does both. I feel like I really want to emphasize to people. I go, just so you know, I have prioritized family here. Like,
Yeah.
but then also that also shows how important my training is to me. Um, I think it's both, but I think it's a lot of it is just like it is extreme disappointment because I'll spend my whole day going like giving everything I can as a dad and going and I get this little reward, I get this little treat, which is training, which
Mm.
is I feel like just as a kid, like you get dessert tonight, and
Yeah.
then you're just like, actually, no, you don't. No, you're not getting dessert tonight. You're like, what?
Yes.
Oh, what? It's like I still
I
solve.
promised myself, like that was the reason to be good, to do all
Yeah,
these things was I was going to get this little treat at the end of
exactly.
it. I get it. We hadn't spoken about the part that sometimes like is bigger. We've talked about what purpose it serves, what a priority it is, how much it's thought about, and yet that can turn on a head on at
Yeah,
any given moment. Like that's part of being a dad and having a family, but you still have this inner experience. And I'm getting used to it because for the most part, I just didn't allow interruptions.
yeah,
If I thought that signing up to something would lead to an interruption, I was
yeah,
not doing that. And then you get married and have kids and have responsibilities, people you work for or work with, and you're no longer a professional at this at training. That's not the thing that's servicing everything else. So
yeah,
it's just something for that goes from lots of people care about to a much, much smaller group of people care about, but you've got to keep that fire alight. Otherwise it goes away entirely. So you're both aware in all the ways we've described, it is important, and you know personally that it's important to you. And yet there's these moments that come up where that needs to dissolve instantly. And I've had to become accustomed to that. And I think the way I go about it is because anyone that knows me knows that training is this. I'd like to think I don't know what people think about. I can't bear to presume, but if you were to know anything about me, it would be that I've been at this training thing for a while. Like that is a consistent feature. So I don't think I need to explain that to the people around me. But I still have that feeling you're talking about it when something comes up, a little part of me, like I think I just dies inside and I just like eat that and I don't acknowledge it because I know everyone knows. So the only thing we're doing differently is I'm trying to stay south of conveying it to everyone else, have disappointment, just because that energy is not helping, and
No,
because I know everyone's cool with my training in the big picture. And the reason that we're all here and even having this conversation and me feeling this feeling is because this is an exception to the rule and for
yeah,
good reason.
yeah, totally, totally. And I feel like that's the next level of um, emotional development for me is just like having that disappointment internally and getting over it pretty quickly and just going, mate, you're a 44-year-old, you're a dad with three kids, one with her special needs. Um, like that's just you've done so much training over the last 5 years. That's great. Like if you add it all up, that's so much, you've done so much training.
Is
This is
it
just
different when you're in a particular phase, like either pre-competition or it's going well, or you're feeling slammed in every direction? So the part where it fills up your cup is more overt than normal.
I think the time I get most disappointed is when it's a track session, because I look forward to track sessions the most, and it's going to be before work. So it's like serving the purpose of making me better at work and then making me better at night when I'm back home
Yeah.
from, that's when I'm most disappointed because I'm like, this was really going to be so helpful for for you guys and for work. This is going to be really important. When a good track session takes 90 minutes, and even if like I only get 45 minutes, I get so disappointed. Like I can warm up, but that's not, I can warm up in 45 minutes. Well, that's poor Penny's like, I don't give a fuck. You've got 45 minutes. Like, that's great.
So what do
That
you do
should,
with 45? Like when the rubber meets the road, how's your decision making go?
if I only get 45 minutes.
Well, if you need to compromise and you know that the session was that you had planned is vaporized, so there's only going to be some poor man's version of it, or maybe that's off the table because it's sprinting and you need to spend most of it warming up. Do
Yeah.
you, how are you okay with, is it adjust or just abandon or depends?
Brendan Cole has really helped me with that. He has really helped. I mean, that's like a good coach, Will, as you would know better than anyone, but I've come from mentality before I met Brendan of just more is more. You have to do more. The
Yeah.
most you do, the faster you'll get. Whereas he's really introduced breathwork into my training. And if I have 45 minutes, he'll say, great, that's fantastic. Let's do a really nice warm up where you concentrate on feeling good. And then you do like a 10-minute breath work where you just reflect on, just think about your body, how good it's feeling, how quickly you could run because you've warmed up really well and your body's feeling great. And then we're going to just skip for 400 meters, just going to skip, you're going to feel playful and you're going to feel expressive. And that's a great session, mate. That is such a good session. It's
So
not
you'll
what,
still get to the track and it'll be like, and clearly you're late. Clearly things have changed. You'll say, this is where I'm at. And then he'll say, this is what I recommend.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a real benefit of working with someone in person because
So
you
good.
have more opportunity to adjust and based on where someone's at on the day, how they're presenting, what their body language looks like, all of
Yeah.
those intangibles. It does limit who a coach can work with and what the scope for an athlete to work with different coaches, but good when you can get it.
Yeah, it is. I would say with Brendan, and this is just to encourage people to, I don't want people thinking, well, I don't have access to a coach like that, so I don't get that decision making, because that's what it is. It's like really good decision making. He spent a lot of time in the Cayman Islands working with Altus, a sprint program, so training people who know their sprinters like Andre de Grasse, and like he's very, very good. So we've been basically coaching me from overseas, and I'm now at a position where we send a lot of, it's basically through WhatsApp and videos, a lot of the coaching he does, and a lot of conversations. But those decisions, I'm making those good decisions now because I've worked with him for a while and I understand what he would think a good session
Yeah.
is. The other day, that exact thing happened. I had 2 hours basically for a track session and a really, really good one that I look forward to. The kinder drop off. Well, what happened was the kinder drop off took too long. My daughter didn't want to go. Then I got her there, and then she didn't want me to leave. And I could tell it wasn't just like, oh, I'd prefer you stayed. She really something had happened. So I stayed there for half an hour, and I sat on the little stools and I drew with her, and that was just a pleasure. It was such a joy. It really was. And I went, okay, I've got 45 minutes of training now, not 2 hours. Um, I know Brendan would love this. If I just do a nice, relaxed warm up, do some breath work, and I sent him the message, almost excited for his response. And he
Yeah.
said, great decision making, really proud of that. Your body's better off because of that session. Your mind's better off because of that session. It wasn't what you wanted to do. Let's do that tomorrow or the day
Yeah.
after. That's fine. It doesn't have to be that session. And I've kind of learned that through him that I think anytime you're able to move your body, that's just a good thing. And provided you frame it the right way, I think you need to believe it as well. Like you can't be doing it going, this is so annoying. I'm not getting the session I want to do. It's just, I'm outside, I'm doing a warm up, I'm doing some breath work. This is great. How lucky am I? I think
Yeah.
having gratitude, yeah, it goes a long way.
It seems as though you've had this career in part where you worked a lot with elite athletes in camp and able
Yeah.
to observe them around training and competition. But the working with an athlete on your athleticism seems to have endowed the more practical knowledge for yourself personally. Do you think that's because you've gotten to a point where you're trying to maximize performance, and so you'll do these additional things now that you're fully aware of the impact that they have? Like where do you attribute your learnings from, given that you've worked with elite athletes in different capacities?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I look back, I don't really do much of the elite sports stuff anymore. To be honest, it is so taxing.
Mhm.
The way I work with teams, I'll spend a lot of time with them. So, and I just it means that equals time away from family at the moment. So I might do it again sometime, but for now, it's not what I want to be doing. But when I worked with them, really my job was to sell is the wrong word, but really get them excited about practicing gratitude. And actually, I remember the first session I did with the Queensland boys, I said, how many of you, they were talking about the anxiety of state of origin and how it's high pressure and it's very stressful. And there were five of them it was their origin debut. And we're talking about all the anxiety involved. And I just said, how many of you as a kid, put your hand up as if as a kid, your dream was to play state of origin footy. And every single hand went up. And I said, guys, you're here. Like you're in the room. You
Mhm.
are living your dream. There are not many people in the world right now who can honestly say they are living your dream. And I think I'd love you to think, I'd love you to, I know you're going to worry about performance selection, where you're going to be picked, the media, but keep a space in your brain to really, let's cultivate that gratitude for how incredibly good that is. And it was kind of my job to get them to, I was in there not really I mean, I kept saying it's not really performance, it's just their mental health and well-being, knowing full well it was performance. I just didn't like saying to the person, the high performance person, I didn't like saying to them, I'm here to do part of your job. Because I didn't want to create that feeling of
Sure.
like, I would just say, oh no, I'm not here for wins and
But
losses.
that
I'm
is
just,
why everyone is here is,
yeah,
yeah, no one's here to like, let's have a good time. Like in the end, that's going to help perform. But at the end of the series, it's going to be 2-1 or 3-0
yeah,
or in some direction. And that's what people are going to remember.
exactly. So I think for my job, it was just about, I tell you, when I was watching them train, the Queensland guys in particular is a really nice one as far as Queensland's, their philosophy around training was just like, healthy and happy. We want healthy and happy. That's what we want from these boys. They have worked. This is the middle of the season. They're cooked. A lot of them are cooked already. Let's have 10 days of healthy and happy. So it was sauna every morning, followed by a swim in the lake. And then it was, how do you feel? Do you feel like training is good for you right now? Because if not, let's just do some craft work. But if you feel like you need to train to feel, we trust you. We 100% trust you.
You know, there's two more H's that you could add to that: hungry and horny. Now, horny for a 10-day camp might not be like super appropriate, but for most people, if they're observing, am I healthy? Am I happy? Am I hungry? Am I horny? These are good indicators that you're.
Right. I love that.
And if you're not any of those things, probably not great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the sauna, get back in the lake.
So that was the. How did you remember? I'm curious as to how you went from working with school kids to working with professional athletes, and the gratitude piece, and how it even would dilute anxiety because it shifts the emphasis from this is threatening to this is actually exactly what I want to be doing.
Yeah.
And it's how great is it? Do you remember
So
when you
clearly.
figured that out?
I so clearly remember the first, and it comes back to Billy Slater, but I had worked with 1,500 schools and it was just a schools program. It's all I ever wanted it to be. I love sports so much, but I'd never thought this is for sport. Just because it never popped into my mind. If someone sat down and discussed it with me, I would have gone, oh yeah, this would be great. I was playing cricket and we had a new guy on our team, Robbie. His dad came over, introduced himself. His name is Brian, and he asked what I did. I told him, and he said, "Oh, I'd love you to come and chat to my work at my workplace." I said, "Oh, thanks, mate. It's more of a schools program, but thank you." He said, "Oh, I think it would really help. Could I get your email address? I wouldn't mind chatting to you about that." And I said, "Oh, okay. Where do you work?" And he said, "Oh, Melbourne Storm." And I said, "Oh, okay. It's not really for the workplace, but yeah, send me an email." I was padded up. I was literally about to go on bat.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of people say when they hear what I do, they say, "Oh, you should come and speak at my work," and I never hear from them again.
Yeah.
Which is it's just like a conversational thing that people say. And then first thing would have been 7:30 on a Monday morning, email from Brian Phelan, head of player welfare at Melbourne Storm,
Mm.
and he said, "I'd love you to come and speak to not head office. I want you to speak to the playing group." Now I'm from Melbourne. I grew up on Aussie rules. I didn't really know. I knew Billy Slater. I knew Cameron Smith. I didn't know anyone else. And I said, I'll catch up with you. We caught up and I said, thank you. I really am touched by this, but it's a primary school program, really. And he said, you'd be surprised. Like there's a lot of stuff these guys missed out on.
Mm.
And I said, I don't know if it's going to work. And he said, well, if it doesn't work, that doesn't matter. Let's just try it. Like, how long is it going to go for? I said, oh, I'd speak for probably an hour. And he went, let's do 45. Let's do 45 minutes because I think he's managing his risk as well. Of
Yeah,
like,
yeah, 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 yeah. How's this gonna land?
yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
don't. It's a bit more, anyway, I went, okay, let's do it. And I remember going into the meeting room at the Melbourne Storm, and the biggest men I've ever seen in my life walk past, and quite a few of them had their iPads with them. It was NBA Finals time, and he did this long introduction about how important mental health is, and I never mentioned mental health, especially with a group like that. I don't want him to. I just want to tell stories. And I finally got up and I started speaking, and I noticed the iPads came down very quickly because I was just telling stories. All I do is tell stories. And 5 minutes in, Billy Slater stopped me. He put his hand up,
Mm.
and I went, "Yes, Mr. Slater." And he goes, "You can call me Billy." I said, "Yes." And he goes, "This is fucking awesome. Keep going." And I remember thinking, well, I wasn't about to stop, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was looking at their faces, and I remember going, "Shit, I have never had a group. I've never ever had a group in 6 years at that point this engaged ever." And it finished, and it was just silence for a bit. And I was telling stories about where the lesson was the power of gratitude, the power of empathy, the power of really feeling what someone else feels and really acting off that, and then just mindfulness, just being present. The power of really just being wherever you are. And a guy in the back row put his hand up. I've never been asked this question. He goes, "Mate, is this evidence based? Is this evidence based, or is this evidence informed, or is this kind of cool stories?" Because I'm happy either way. I want to know. And if it is evidence based, I'd love to know the research behind it. If you could, I remember going, Jesus, I did not expect
From a
that.
player?
Did not expect that from a player, a rugby league player. I didn't see it coming. And then I said, yeah, it is, mate. I'll send you all the research. If you want to have a read of it, he goes, yeah, that'd be good. The actual proper research studies though, not the summary. Yeah, no, I'll send it all through to you. And then, then the players like they were giving me a hug when I left. They're like hugging me. I was like, what the hell's going on here? This is just. And I remember thinking, well, this is really hit home. But then I said to Brian Phil, I said, who was that guy I asked the question? He goes, are you joking? And no, who's that? And he goes, that's Cooper Cronk. And I went, oh, right, I have heard of him. And now I know Cooper really well and I understand. He's a very intelligent man and he loves this. He loves all the research and science, loves it. And then I ended up doing 28 presentations to the Melbourne Storm to every cohort they could think of within the club over that next year. And I'll never forget the influence, the impact that Melbourne Storms had on my life because they said, this needs to be every club. We don't want to have this as a competitive advantage. This every club, the competition needs this. And then it became every single club. And then I get calls from Collingwood Football Club saying, "Hey, we just had one of our people knows that Melbourne Storm. They said we got to have you in," and then it just took off from there basically, and it was every elite sporting. But I always felt a little bit like not imposter syndrome, but just like it's really basic stuff that I'm introducing here. Like it really is. It's not too in depth, but I think that's why maybe it's having an impact. It's a guy called Marty. Oh, I don't want to get his name wrong. Shit, you can edit this, but Marty Kennan. Is it Marty Kennan who plays for? We'll just call him. There's a guy called Marty who I spoke at the Sydney Roosters, and I remember him sitting in the back row, and he pulled his hoodie over his head and put his head down when I started talking. He's one of the he came when he walked in, he had his arms folded, and he just looked so pissed off he was there, and I'm so used to that. It's fine, but I do try and win those guys over. I could tell he was just like, "What the fuck is this? Why am I hearing a mental health talk? I just want to train or whatever is." And then I saw him walk out, hoodie on, didn't look at me, walked straight past. I thought, well, he hated that. That's fine, but that's not his thing. He hated it. And 3 years later, I was doing a public talk in Sydney, and this guy walked in the back with his mum. I was like, that's the guy from the Sydney Roosters. That's that Marty guy from the Roosters. And then the end of the talk came along. He walks up the front with me, and he's with his mum, and he's in tears. And he said, I was going to tell you something, but I can't. I can't. He walked out. I was like, that's okay. And then his mum came to me and she said, what he wanted to say was that you're the reason he's still alive. She said, he said, and then I caught up with him out the front and he said, I went to the club that day and I'd made plans to end it all. I had stuff in the boot of my car. I was going to my mum and dad's house. Um, and I was going to end it all at mum and dad's house because they're away for the weekend. Um, and the talk is the reason I'm still alive. It's the reason I'm still here. And so I have to remind myself of that because sometimes I think that's pretty basic stuff we're talking about. But on the odd occasion, it has been really life-changing as it was for Marty.
Did it feel basic when you came up with it, especially with Gem?
Mm.
Because it seems so like by the time you present it 1,000 times and it almost seems simple, but did you feel like you'd cracked a code at the outset? And then as you could see it landing in all these different, like I find it surprising that you had any sort of imposter syndrome after you'd been even after that first Melbourne Storm
Yeah.
presentation. I would have gone, okay, we're on here.
Yeah, I think the imposter syndrome comes from the fact that I don't want anyone thinking that I'm a guru, and I don't want anyone thinking that I'm a psychologist. And I don't, what psychologists do is so extraordinary. I'm not. That's not me. And I don't want anyone thinking that I think you do gem and then everything's fine. Like you do gratitude, empathy, mindfulness, everything's fine. I don't think that. I think all three things on their own are so powerful. And if you combine them together, they work well together because the more mindful you are, the better you are at noticing the great stuff happening around you. We're surrounded by incredible stuff all the time. It's just we miss it all the time. And the more present we are, the more likely we are to see opportunities to be there for someone else, or the more likely we are to just see someone else is struggling and to step up for them. And so I just love that they work together so nicely. I never once have said, this is the answer, you do these three things and you're fine. I think I'm always very conscious of every time I go to an elite sporting club, there is a psychologist sitting there whose job it is this that they potentially might feel like I feel like I'm coming in and doing their job. I don't at all. It's just, I hope that what I do leads to more people knocking on their door because I do talk a lot about like, hey, we all struggle. Like you have someone at the club, you're so lucky, someone whose job it is to help you with those struggles. You just got to take the first step. And so I think for me, it was like, because I would get pushback from psychologists often. Some psychologists are like, great, this is the more the merrier. Like I agree with what you're saying. So come in and talk about it. And you talk about it in a way that I can't. And then I will give them therapy in a way that you can't. It's great. But others would be a bit more, hang on, no, this is, I talk about these things, not
Yeah.
you. I totally get where that comes from. But I think that's where my imposter syndrome was. I didn't want anyone to think I was like, I'm staying in my lane. Like I'm staying in my lane always. And I'm talking about those three things. When the players put their hand up and ask a question I don't know the answer to, I say, I have no idea. That's not me. So maybe not imposter syndrome, just very self-aware, I think, of where my work sits and the limits of it, and then the what it can do, but also what it can't do, I guess.
Do you consider yourself to be an educator? Is that if you had to put a one word, like if you're traveling on the, what is it, the incoming
Yeah,
part, as you're flying to Australia, you have to basically boil it down to
yeah.
a single word.
I
Yeah.
still say teacher. I'm a trained primary school, and I understand through primary school teaching how to set up an environment where people will learn. I get. That's what I and I did that professionally for 6 years. It's like I understand how to create an environment and a structured hour where people will, they're at a place where, we don't learn from people we don't like. So we need to like the people. So when I walk into a room of complete strangers, you need to set up a situation where they can like you within a few minutes because they'll decide in 2 minutes if they're going to listen or not. Or they'll decide if they want to be open to learning or not. It's not a conscious thing, it's subconscious. But so in the first 2 minutes, I'll always tell a self-deprecating but story that gets people to laugh because that's in Australia, that's what we like. We just
Yeah.
make themselves like people who don't think they're very good. We I ended up doing this in the States. I had college sports asked me to go and do, and it was a disaster. It was because it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Yeah, not quite the same, no.
But the answer to the question is I write teacher on the passport thing,
T-shirt.
the
Yeah.
visa. That's what I that's what I think I am. That's what I'm confident saying. I'm good at, I think I'm good at that.
Because you're going into, well, more previously, we were going into these organizations and you're trying to influence the culture and then the environment of how people go about things. Did you notice differences in both the players, the personnel, and the physical environment that were more conducive to this than others? And what were the things that you had noticed that tended to facilitate the good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I remember. I mean, the rugby league clubs were so open to this, and they were so inviting and so welcoming. So too were the majority of AFL clubs. I remember doing A League, and it was a few clubs are great. I went to every single club, but there were some where the leadership didn't want to do it. I remember the coach at one of the clubs said, I was waiting outside. How should I say? No, I may not say who it is, but I was waiting outside the lecture room to go in, and one of the coach said, "Boys, this isn't compulsory." And he goes, "But if you want to stay, have fun. There's no one hanging around for this in front of me." So like five or six of them stayed because they felt sorry for me. And one of them apologized and said, "Sorry, that's he's a bit funny like that. He doesn't believe in this kind of stuff." And so I did this hour that the whole time, like, what am I even doing this for? Like, this is if it's not supported, if the head coach doesn't support it, then and then you look at a place like Port Adelaide, where we had such incredible success with this program. Michael Voss and Ken Hinkley were so excited about it. Ken Hinkley, I mean, Michael Voss drove it. He got me in there in the first place, now coach at Carlton, but he was assistant coach there. And Ken Hinkley was the coach. And Ken Hinkley didn't know much about it, but he trusted Michael Voss. And the first session was on gratitude. And he came and chatted to me straight away afterwards. And we chatted for 20 minutes it was in front of the players. And he shared stories with me. And he would come to every session. I'd fly over to Adelaide to do these sessions. He would come to every session. He'd be in the front row, be taking notes. And that sent a message to all the playing group that this is like, it's like Billy Slater and Cam Smith were the most invested in the Melbourne Storm program. They
Yeah.
were the most, they're like, guys, we're doing this, and everyone just followed them. So I think when the leaders get excited about it, it works. Especially you think of a young kid coming up, a rookie coming through, wide-eyed and just like, oh, elite sport, I've made it. What do I do here? It's such a foreign environment. What do I do here? Oh, my captain Billy Slater or my captain Cameron Smith is excited about this. I'm excited about this, and I think that I mean that's huge.
The buy-in or enthusiasm.
Totally.
Yeah. And how often, just because I'm thinking about, you're in an individual sport and you've watching these environments of people where there's a whole team. There's guys that are on the bench. There's guys that are in the broader squad. There's a coach, assistant coach, player coaches, strength coach, physios, this whole organization. And then now your experience in your event and your direct coach as an individual athlete, which with a much smaller cohort. Do you ever notice that contrast?
Yeah, I do. It's such a strange line of work because I'll go into the club for a morning and then I'm gone. I'll come back in a week's time, and then so I'm not really around the place. So the entire club will come in. So I'll have the playing group, and then there's the high performance staff, the coaches, the some clubs will bring some of the admin people in. I prefer to try and do it in both separate because it's a very different world. Um, and you'll do the talk, and then I'll give them the journals so they can practice the stuff after I've gone. And they all walk out, and I always feel very strange watching them walk out. A lot of the clubs, the players will come and say thank you, and they'll give you a handshake or a hug. Or whatever. They're very, very polite people, but very polite places, elite sporting clubs, which might surprise some people, but they're so polite and well
Mhm.
mannered, always doing the right thing. And then you just get this spattering of people reaching out to you in the next week that you wouldn't expect. Like you might see um, head of strength and conditioning who has come a little bit late because he's come straight from another meeting or whatever, or I don't know, he's been working with other players. He'll jump in, he'll look a bit confused at the start, and what is this? And then I misjudge their face for they're like, what the fuck's this person doing here? And then I'll get this beautiful long email from them 4 days later saying, telling me a story from their life and how much it resonated with them. Then you'll get one of the assistant coaches. I mean, one of the assistant coaches from Port Adelaide sent me this beautiful long message the other day. We did the session 5 years ago with the Port Adelaide guys, still staying in touch. You don't know who it's going to hit with. What I have found in general, it really resonates with the senior playing group, like the guys who are probably got a few years left in them at most,
Yeah.
and it resonates with the guys who are in their first couple of years at the club.
Hmm.
I think they feel so out of their depth and so vulnerable, excited but very vulnerable. So I think anything that makes them feel anchored, and I think that I mean, sound is a massive generalization, but that's what I find really hits. It really hits with them.
Yeah, it's funny because I think about someone like BJ or just a 400, a track athlete in Australia who is trying to be the very best in their chosen field, and there's just not any of this. Like no one's organizing for you to show up to talk to them about how they should be grateful to be able to run before or after shifts at Baker's Delight. Like it's which is what it is for a lot of Olympic athletes. And I think I can't speak on behalf of Olympians, but for in non-professional sports that are relatively underfunded compared to our football codes in Australia. And then there's these perhaps necessary conversations about men's versus women's sport and what women ought to get paid. And then there's every athlete from uh, men and women's sport where no one gets paid. And it's kind of an abstract thing to demand that you should get paid to do the thing that you've chosen to do. And maybe that's different when you're a female athlete that plays X sport and there's men that also play that sport that are getting paid a lot more. But most of the athletes I know, they didn't come out of their careers with all basically experiences and ailments, not investments.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I've trained with elite sprinters and elite runners in Australia who are so much more elite.
Mm,
Some of the footballers that I might work with, that some of the footballers I work with, I mean, they're elite. Like, don't get me wrong, they're elite, and they're in the
yeah,
top 800 footballers in Australia.
yeah,
But I spend a lot of time training with Katrina Bissett, who is the fastest woman in Australia ever over 800
Yeah.
meters.
So 155, 56,
What was that, sorry?
156-ish.
157.8, I think it is.
Okay.
And that's the fastest woman in Australian history. And she is getting none of the stuff that these guys who are in the top 800 get.
Yeah.
No one's coming to do talks to her. No one's, I mean, the VIS do the best they can with the resources they've got, but there's not much money. Well, there's no money in it really.
No.
And I often find that a little bit, you know, some of the athletes we've got, some of the track athletes in Australia right now, it's so exciting how fast they are running, what they're going to do for the sport. They are someone like Lockie Kennedy, who just won a silver medal in the world
60.
beat Gak out over 200.
I saw that, sorry to interrupt. I also saw that there was a 17-year-old girl in Queensland that ran 11:14, maybe within the last couple of days.
Leah, I think her name's Leah. I forget her surname, Leah, but I watched that race and saw that online. So many exciting young athletes coming through, but they're not, and they are the fastest. They're the best in Australia.
Yeah.
And yet, yeah, there's a lot of money going into the top 800. Anyway, that's just people like watching footy. So I understand why that's the case, but it
So
just,
it's the case in the US to a different scale as well.
yeah,
Like there's not an awful lot of money in track and field. I've always found that surprising, given that that's
the problem. Yeah,
what everyone does. Yeah, like everyone can have a running race. The equipment requirements are zero, so the pecking order, like, and everyone wants to watch the 100, but maybe only every 4 years.
yeah, that's that's so,
It's this seems to be because I'll keep track of what's happening in the World Championships, maybe even Diamond Leagues, but clearly that's not most people.
yeah, no, great. It's a very strange, yeah, I mean, I love it, obviously, but seeing the fastest runner in the world, that is exciting. Like
Yeah.
that, so exciting. So I agree with you that it's not, if you're not Noah Lyles in the US or Fred Curley or, um, you're probably not making a lot of money.
No,
I don't,
no, and even those guys, I'd argue how much it is.
relative to what, relative to their ability, yeah.
Yeah, for sure to their ability. And then you've got these football guys that are saying, oh, I could run 100 meters far. Like there's a guy in the NFL that's
Yeah.
talks routinely about challenging Noah Lyles to a foot race, but there are levels.
They're absolutely. I mean, I often hang around footy clubs and playing footy for a long time. You hear people saying, "Oh, he would have been an incredible. He could be an Olympian with his running." It is totally different. Like it is. It's a whole new level. Like
Yeah.
it's not. They're yeah. There are a couple of guys playing AFL who probably could have been really good runners, but the good runners are not. It's a different sport.
Yeah. And then becomes more and more of a skill, like just getting from the blocks to up to race pace, especially the 100, which is where it's most of the American football guys think that that's such a skill.
Yeah, it's like holding your form over the last 40 meters as well. Like you might be able to start well, you might be, I don't know. It always frustrates me hearing that rhetoric because I'm like, having seen them up close, they're different species altogether.
I think that is the difference between seeing them up close and not in any sport, because if you go to a NBA game,
Mm.
that's the only way to be relatively close to the court to see the guards who are 6'6", 6'8", how big they are is the only way that you can see how big the big guys are,
Yeah,
because otherwise it normalizes on a TV.
yeah,
They were the running race. I went to the US Olympic trials for Tokyo and was sitting trackside, as in could reach out and touch a hurdle trackside for
wow,
the women's 110 hurdles. And just the way that they had the hurdle set up, really, this was in Oregon, a University of Oregon track. The hurdles were set up really close to the where the crowd was. But just the way they moved through space to me, and I've seen people move through space, was so impressive. And I don't think it's easy to appreciate if you've only ever seen it on TV.
yeah. I mean, that specific example is probably, if I was asked to give an example of why athlete track athletes are so incredible. You look at the hurdles, I cannot believe what they can do with their body. I
Yeah.
cannot believe. And the courage it takes as well. Like it's a dangerous endeavor. And to go at it 100%. I had the same thing at a track meet the other day. I saw the men's hurdles, and I was there with a friend going, I don't think I can actually jump over that hurdle if there was a high jump mat on the other side. Like I don't, and they're doing at full pace. They're clearing
Mm.
eight lots, whatever it is. I agree. Getting up close and personal it's a incredible experience.
Who are the most impressive athletes that you've seen in person, where you've seen stuff where it just rewrites what you thought was achievable by a human being?
Yeah, so many different examples. Where to start? I mean, I saw Steve Hooker win gold at Commonwealth Games in Melbourne, and I've known Steve. I went to primary school together, but I was watching the pole vault. To me, as an event, is just like,
Yeah, how do you do that for the first
oh,
time?
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I know that there's a gradation, but still, eventually you've got to stick that thing in the hole and
Yeah, so that was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. Bit of a different one, but watching Steve Smith bat in the nets up close and personal, watching the way he manipulates his wrists and his hand-eye coordination is. I was standing right behind the net, and someone who was bowling, I think it was Stark, was bowling, so fast, and you could tell he'd made decisions on what shot he was going to play when the ball was, 30 centimeters out of Stark's hand. He just knew he'd picked up all the cues already and was in position. And watching it up close was, as a cricket tragic, that was unbelievable. I just couldn't believe that. I just love that. But I also watched Gout warm
mm,
up. I watched Gout warm up for his 200, which he didn't end up winning. I mean, he's 17 years old and he's up against a 21-year-old who just got silver in the world indoors over 60. So I didn't think he was going to win. I was surprised that he was the favourite there, but we were watching him run against men for the first time ever. He'd never raced against men ever, and he was doing it at the Maurie plant meet in front of 10,000 people. Um, but I watched him warm up, and he's one of the things you see with sprinters is
ankle stiffness.
yes, yeah, the ankle stiffness is, and if you're not familiar with sprinting, if you think about you want to get off the track as quick as possible, and if your foot is sort of like if you imagine it sort of sinking into the track and sort of like rolling to get back up again, like you'd picture a marathon runner to roll along the ground,
Yeah.
how much time. So ankle stiffness is the key to getting back up again quickly. He's got the skinniest legs you'll ever see. And so because of that, you think they're not strong, but there's just no, they're so rigid and they're just like watching that up close and the power that he puts into the track, and it looks like he's flying. Like he spends so little time on.
Mm.
It was one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen athletically. And you can find YouTube videos of that. I've seen many YouTube video where it's a close up. I don't know who did it. It's a close up slow-mo of him on the track, and it's a thing of beauty. It is to be able to watch him for the next 10 years is going to be such a pleasure.
Well, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Just because he seems to run with the pressure well, and he's got a coach that seems to get the big picture and is happy to manage him through the career, not just the training side of things. Like when I've seen it publicly speak about, where he's at, it's not just about what he's doing, but his experience as this athlete that's going to have more and more pressure on him. But you hope it all goes well because he's got a ton of, but for a country that where it is an every 4 years thing,
Yeah.
he seems to have caught fire as this, well, he's the guy. And he's kind of said, well, I'll be the guy. And
Yes, hasn't
like,
he?
yeah. And I'm like, well, I hope you are.
Yeah.
I've spent a little bit of time with Noah Lyles because I went and visited Lance Browman's group in Florida,
Amazing. Yeah.
yeah, which is really cool. And you can see there's something about him. Even as he's just one in the group doing the same thing as the rest of the group, there's an expectation. It's like, well, be the guy all the time. Like, and when he goes to training now, or any meet, or goes on a bus or wherever he is, that's going to be the expectation that
Yeah.
And some people are going to be at peace with that, and some are not.
So true. It's so true. I'm very, very I've made the assumption it's just going to work out for him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the optimist, like, why not? And it might do, and people do look. It's the same way Thorpe, the way he swam. There was something notable about it, even for those of us that really didn't know anything about swimming. You can see something about the way that he moves through
Yeah.
water that's special, and then you just want talent to be realized.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I was sitting next to Brendan at this meet, and he was the soft tissue therapist for the world underage championships when Gout Gout was there. And he spent a lot of time with Gout Gout's coach. And I said, "What's she like?" And he said, "She is the perfect
Mm,
person for Gout Gout, like the perfect person. She's very firm, very strong, very honest, doesn't put up with shit."
yeah.
Him right now in his life, he said at least right now in his life, that is exactly the person he needs in her life. So I think that combined with his ankles gave me great confidence.
Did he say anything? And I'd imagine a soft tissue therapist in that position might not be too vocal, but I'd want to know if that, like, do his calves feel different than a normal set of calves?
It's a great question, which I didn't ask because I don't know if he treated Gak out. I
Yeah,
ducked
okay.
that
And
question.
and also because if you're asking the question, it's like, how do I ask this in a not creepy way? Like, how do his legs feel? But I've heard that the soigneurs in the Tour de France, the guys that work in managing the bodies of the cyclists through races and through camps, and they can tell something about how their fatigue's presenting, but also something about the talent of the rider, even if it's not yet realized.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'll ask
Uh
this question to Brendan next time I speak to him.
yeah, yeah, he'd have an idea maybe. We're going to bring this plane down for landing. One thing I did want to mention, because I've said it a couple of times publicly, because I think in owning your failures is important. And when it comes to this podcast, I had one big failure, which is I recorded a podcast and it was great, good conversation. Went to this point at the end where I concluded by ending the recording and realized something had happened at the start and it never even started. And I didn't have the plums to own it at the time. I can't just say, "Hey, mate, this thing that we've just been doing for the last 2 or 3 hours, like there was just a nice chat between you and I." So I waited 24 hours to let him know. And most people are going to underappreciate this guest, but you won't, is Wade Van Niekerk. And I was really excited about even the scope to talk to him. And then, yeah,
Have you, so you didn't go back and do it again?
he offered, but he went deep. It was one of those ones where he said, "I haven't spoken about these things publicly," sort of podcast. And
Oh,
the time difference with South Africa is funky. And all of these, at least for me, it feels like I'm super mindful of the fact that you've given me and my listeners, my audience, a chunk of your time, and it's really appreciated. And the only thing I can do is to value that and to respect it by doing my part well. So no sleep. I did it late at night because of the time difference, and then couldn't sleep that night and bothered my wife repeatedly with, "Mark, I just can't believe I did that." And so now at the start, I'm super diligent about making it happen. And I've mentioned it a couple of times. And when I say Wade Van Niekerk, some people go, "Oh, yeah, like great." I'll go, he's the world record holder for 400 meters. He did that in the Olympic final. First guy to run sub 44, sub 20, and sub 10. And just a great guy and a good chat, great chat. And then, yeah, so
if people don't know Wayne Van Niekerk, you can Google, you can watch on YouTube Usain Bolt's reaction when he saw Wade Van Niekerk break the world record. It's like Usain Bolt was impressed with speed. So
yeah,
that's,
his record
yeah,
in the
yeah,
four.
yeah.
And his seasons in 2016, 2017 were two of the best ever seasons, especially for a 400 athlete. And he then hurt. He tore his ACL in a charity rugby game, for those that don't know. And he's had some decent performances, but by the standards that he reached previously, not quite. So I was talking about how does he feel about all of that? And
Wow.
it'd be as you'd imagine it might, which is not easy and a journey. And he elaborated all of that. So, you and I can appreciate what was lost more than most.
I love
Um,
going from him. Well, I didn't get that 400-meter runner. Who's another 400-meter runner?
yeah, who's a guy in that's in similar esteem? I knew that even though compared to like I have a collection of world record holders and Olympic gold medalists as guests so far, and on a pure performance basis alone, not exactly in that ilk, but I think you've thought a lot about high performance and training and how it all works together. And anytime we've talked about your own, you've emphasized the role that it plays and how you're going about it and how you're still trying to learn and add tools that can help you get better and what role it plays in your life is working as well as working with professional athletes and how it all works together and how it all progressed over time is a curiosity of mine. So I really appreciate you elaborating on that and making the time for us to have a chat.
I appreciate the opportunity because, as I said, no one asked me. So I'm you've copped it with both barrels today because I was
Yeah,
so
we're here at Mostly Training and happy to talk about training.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, because it is mostly what I'm doing, and so it's been just yeah. I mean, I'm such a huge fan of yours. Like, there aren't too many people that when they're doing a story or a post on Instagram, I like go oh, and I like sit forward and watch it properly. You're one of those people, very because I think the more I've got into it, the more I realize I don't know. There's so much I don't know about training. And so to be able to learn from people like yourself and Brendan and be totally humble and just like, I feel like the gym isn't an overly humble place, but the more humble you are when you're in there, the better you'll get because there's the people in there, most people in there know the experts know what's good. And when you find the right person, listening to them and doing what they say has just been yeah, understanding you don't know much and just leaning into that has been so helpful. But anyway, I was about to go another
Just
tangent.
on that, yeah. But have you noticed that the people that you've worked with at the highest levels are sometimes the most humble because they're most aware of,
Totally,
yeah,
totally. It's like I think the more elite they've got, the more they realize they also don't know, and they are like so often. Like Brendan trained me for a year, and I ran a really quick 400, and he goes, "I'm so happy that worked. I've actually never coached a 400 runner before, and I tried some really funky stuff with you. So I'm really I went, what do you mean? What funky stuff? And he goes, oh, that there was a month of the phase three we did. I did some really weird stuff because I had a hunch it might work. And it did. It's great.
yeah,
Gosh, so you're still trying stuff. You're
you
still,
got to, yeah.
whereas that's the kind of coach I want, not someone who's like, yeah, mate, well, I know all this stuff. So you did the program I told you to do. And I just kind of love that. So, but yes, I would agree with that. I would agree. The people like yourself and Brendan are very humble in the approach and the way that you communicate knowledge, all that kind of stuff.
You're also aware of all the ass kickings you've had. Like that, you're measuring it not necessarily against your best performances all the time, but maybe the times in which you underperformed, which makes you really aware of what it can look like if you don't do everything well. So you do everything well to increase the
Yeah.
likelihood of things going the way you want, but all the time aware of all the ways in which it doesn't. And when you're working with people as a coach, you're just trying to save them from making some of those same decisions if you know it's not going to end up the way that they
Yeah.
want. And that's why he'd be so forthcoming with feedback on when you make good decisions because it's like, fuck, this is all I want for the people I work with is to make good decisions in their own self-interest. Like we're coalescing around what's important to you, and all a coach can do is help you get there.
Totally. Totally.
Cool. Thanks, mate. Really appreciate it.